Okay, so go ahead and make your motion if you would.
Well, I move that we adopt Island Transit Recovery Story statement for public distribution and specifying our recovery plans.
And that would be dependent on the signature of all board members?
Yes.
I just help modify
Sure,
your
yeah,
motion.
dependent upon the signature of the board.
Sure. Is
I'll
there a
second.
We have a motion and a second on this. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. I'm voting yes. And we have adopted this subject to the signature of all of the board members and Mr. Preston. Thank you very much for the effort that you put into this, Ken, and thank you to the staff for also participating in this. The way this is going to be successful, at least in my opinion, is going to be where the spirit and to the letter of the word is bottoms up, from everybody buying into it up and down the pipeline of all of the staff, the workers, and the management. Thank you. Next order of business, and I hope that that is also not just appeasing the public, but the public recognizes that it is substantive in the action that we are taking about helping to turn this program around. Item number 2 is Resolution 5-15 is a resolution of the Island Transit Board, the directors declaring certain property of Island Transit surplus and authorizing the disposal of such property. And in the packet, there was a schedule that was not complete, and we have a revised schedule that's been distributed. There's a number of vehicles in here that some of them show mileage, and well, they all show mileage and the vehicle numbers. And Mr. Grasta will present this, and he will explain on some of these vehicles on the surface. It appears, if you look just at mileage, the question would be, why are you replacing a vehicle with only 91,000 miles on it or 75,000 miles? And I think these types of questions need to be discussed more in detail so that the public understands why we are reviewing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request is to, the intent of the resolution is requesting disposal of certain unneeded surplus vehicles in the support fleet as well as in the regular bus fleet. The buses listed in on the resolution, the buses that were previously discussed, you recall the larger color listing, color chart you received, I think at the workshop and maybe even the meeting before, had the total fleet and which buses of the fleet we were going to initially surplus. However, we did not present to you the support vehicles that we desire to surplus, only because we didn't realize we had so many support vehicles we could surplus. And so this resolution contains that list of 12 vehicles as well. Going down the support vehicle list, we have 3 older Toyotas there that have met their useful battery life, either by mileage or by age. And those 3 vehicles have met or surpassed the expected battery life. To change out those battery packs, I believe, is 3,000 or 4,000 apiece.
Roughly 3,500.
3,500. And because these vehicles are not needed in the fleet, there are a couple reasons why we don't believe we need to keep them on the lot. Don't need to replace the batteries, and even if we did, they would still be extra vehicles we don't necessarily need right now, or we don't need now. Then we have vehicle 656, a Dodge van that is over its expected life cycle of 150,000 miles and is 10 years old, not needed. 2000, let's see, then there's a Ford van, 667, which has a high number of miles, but also was involved in a fairly major accident with extensive costs associated with repair. That vehicle is 9 years old, and we do not need that vehicle in the fleet, and it's too expensive to keep in the fleet. Then we have two Astros, 2002, 13-year-old vehicles. Both of those were previously surplus last year. For some reason, never taken off the lot, but they were surplus because of extensive accident damage, and were sidelined and have been for quite some time. Another Astro, 155,000 miles, high miles, and again, a Vanpool van that's not needed in the fleet. We have a facilities maintenance vehicle, a 1999 Ford van with 130,000 miles. It's an extra vehicle that we do not need. Another Chevy Astro. It's an older vehicle, 2002. It has a major water leak that has puzzled the shop for a long time as far as finding the leak and keeping the leak sealed. It's caused major electrical problems, and it will be too expensive to repair, and it's not needed in the Vanpool fleet. Two other facilities vehicles, 2006 Fords, high miles, 164,000 on the one and 155 on the other. Two vehicles that are not needed in the fleet. So that's a rundown on the 12 support vehicles. The buses, in the past I've explained the life expectancy issues related to mileage and age on those. In total, we have 12 support vehicles and 20 buses of various sizes that I propose that we surplus and either sell or put to auction.
Okay, thank you very much. This time, will there be any public comments regarding this? The gentleman.
Real briefly, Mr. Alberg, Joe Kunzler here. When these vehicles are surplus, are they sold? And if they're sold, where's the money going to go? Is it going to be set aside as a contingency or what? I just want to be clear about that.
Right, and I believe...
Let me interrupt you for just a moment, please, Mr. Grasta. If you would kindly present your questions to the board, and the board will allow the staff an opportunity to answer those questions so that we don't get in this dialogue discussion going back and forth. Okay. So thank you for your comments. Mr. Grasta will address that after we've had other comments if there are any. Having no further comments, Gail?
Gail Falco Kirk. In regards to the 3 Toyotas, I guess, I'm gathering that those are maybe Priuses. And I would like to know if any of those 3 Priuses or 3 Toyotas that are being put up for surplus, is one of them by any chance due to extensive rodent damage? And if not, is there, do we know how much we paid to have extensive rodent damage inside of a Prius vehicle repaired?
Thank you. You know, the reason for allowing the public to ask these questions in a group like this is then we go to Mr. Grasta or whoever we're going to have answer the questions. They can consolidate the questions into their answers. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, at this time, I would bring this conversation to the board, and the board could ask the staff to respond to that if they wish.
Well, I would just add that as far as conversations starters, these vehicles were discussed extensively at workshop, and they're all have met or exceeded recommended either mileage or age. And I believe as we figured out that out of the fleet that we had out there was actually a total of 33, I believe it was, vehicles that are just, for whatever reason, past practice was once you got it, you're going to keep it forever. So these are things that are going to save considerably on maintenance costs. The rodent damage, I wouldn't know, but I would refer to maintenance. Do you know anything about Prius with rodent damage?
Yes, and that vehicle is in that area that's going to be surplus. The price of the repairs, I'm not prepared to give that this time.
Right. So, they, like as I said, they're just far exceeded their service life. Proceeds received from this, we've discussed, are going to go into the VRR fund. This is going to be used for replacement vehicles, to meeting our match on replacement vehicles. This money will be earmarked for replacement vehicles. Okay, but that does, because these are being surplus, doesn't mean we're going out and buying 33 more. No, these are ones they're collecting rust out here. And whatever we can get for them, we get for them, and we can use it to help pay our match on new buses. What are we, the current bill is, we got 9 total.
Yeah.
We get 9 total going to be replaced.
Yes.
And that'll have our fleet at the size that it needs to be, which is far less than what we got.
Mr. Cussler, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Gail, does that answer your question? I have a question about the rodent issue. Is there a rodent damage in a vehicle or isn't there?
If there was?
There was. And was that a vehicle that was, it's a van?
It's a Prius.
Oh, okay. And that was taken home, parked someplace, when we park them out here, we have rodent damage out here?
We've
Or-
had some rodent damage out here, but this particular vehicle is issued at Camino.
Okay.
And we're not sure where the rodent damage exactly came from.
Okay.
It could have came from the actual facility itself as well as where the vehicle's parked in the evening.
Okay.
I might add to that. In Allen County, rodent damage on a vehicle is not uncommon. It's a very common thing. And just for maintenance, just to lighten things up again, you know what works really good? You tie a bounce dryer sheet underneath the hood. Keeps the rats out. They don't like the smell. It's a lot cheaper than a rat guard. Anyway, that's what I do. Works.
Yeah, oh, well, my comment is the same as yours, Mr. Chairman. We have worked through these carefully, both in individual questions and in staff reports at the workshop. So I believe now the only vehicles that may be retained are in 1 or 2 cases for maintenance parts. Are you keeping anything for parts?
We are not planning on keeping any more cars.
Okay.
Okay, we have 33, excuse me, I'm
32.
sorry. 32.
I think it's 32.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to point out that this is not necessarily the final list of vehicles that we will be surplusing. We do have a few more vehicles that we could have added to this list, but I would feel more comfortable using them as a buffer because of the age of our fleet. And maybe that was the idea of buses being used for parts, not really parts, but being used as extra backup, besides the spares that we have, a little extra backup because of the age of the fleet. But as we go on, we may have a few more buses, a few more support vehicles in the future.
Yeah, and the chair is correct. This does add up to 33.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions on this. I believe in our workshop that it was explained that with these Priuses, it was a battery and harness issue that is primarily our problem with those, and the cost of replacing that stuff exceeds the value, and it wasn't explained to me if it was blue book value or street value, market value. So if we're spending between $3,000 and $5,000 to replace the battery and harness assembly in there, what, if we did spend that money on those vehicles, would they be usable, safely usable on into the future? I mean, one of them has 91,000 miles. You have some of them with 140, 116,000. I drive a 97 Toyota pickup, and it has 120,000 miles on it. I have no intentions of getting rid of it for another 100,000 miles. I'm not. So, they're pretty good vehicles. So if we invest let's say hypothetically, it's $5,000 into these things, are we going to get a year or two service out of those, and are they needed?
It is possible. From my research, what I've learned is if a Prius sits very long with that type of hybrid technology in it, it's not very good for the batteries. It will wear the vehicle out quicker, where you need to replace that battery pack more often. And my understanding is we currently have a couple extra Priuses that we do use, but only on occasion, which we've been jump starting on a regular basis. So instead of visiting that possible issue of having to go through battery down to battery at extensive cost, I believe Mr. Graska agrees with me as we try to recuperate what cost we can from them while they're still good without it costing us more money.
So the previous administration then accumulated just a fleet because they had the money to do that? I mean, give me some background and what your opinion is. How did we arrive at all these vehicles that are not needed? That's what I keep hearing.
We actually cut staff, employees. We cut some of those employees. That was some of the vehicles that wound up sitting into the parking lot. That's some of the background that I know.
Okay.
And the other thing I've heard, may I jump in? Another thing I've heard is that there were a number of vehicles that were surplus in previous years, but not actually moved off the lot. And so there's been a couple of surplus actions that haven't been fully implemented. So that would account, I think, particularly for a couple of the larger buses and maybe some of the smaller. But the third thing I heard is that there's been, in some cases, accident damage that isn't worth repairing. And of course, that's somewhat of a judgment call, but it's also based on the resale value of the car.
When we have an accident like that, we're in an insurance pool, correct? Does the transit district get paid for that damage, that loss? Is there a claim?
Through our premiums. Through our premiums, the premiums are adjusted based on the previous year's activity for the transit agency. It's based on mileage. And some other complicated formula that the pool uses to even it out for all the systems across the state. But at the time, we don't pay anything more or anything less. That's built into the formula for the next insurance year.
Well, let me simplify my question. We have damage, let's say it's $5,000 worth of damage. We have to repair it, whether we repair it inside or outside of the shop. We have to pay somebody $5,000 to pay that. Does that come out of the front end, come out of our budget, or do we receive a check from the insurance pool to cover that loss?
Frankly, I haven't run across that yet, so I believe we pay for it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, that we pay for it, but I don't know that we necessarily get reimbursed for it.
trying.
I think that there's a deductible, and that's the amount we pay.
Okay.
The difference would be paid by the insurance company via check.
You know, I would like to know that. We don't have to know it right now, but that is something that I think in terms of developing our management skills and understanding of what our obligations are, and how it affects our budget, I think we need to know those answers. Thank you.
I would just throw one more thing in. I would be willing to wager that our deductible is much higher than what the damages to the vehicles. The insurance pool is quite expensive deductible. This is major. The worst tip is just like your typical risk pool, and it's for paying major claims. Is the main thing behind it. So the deductible is probably far exceeds any damage.
It's 5,000.
It is fine, yeah. Well, you know, that's good to know because the more we improve our management skills, the better results I think we're going to get. Any further discussion on this? And if not, I'll entertain a motion adopting resolution 5-15.
I would gladly move to approve resolution 5-15.
All right, Mr. Hanold has made a motion to adopt resolution 5-15, seconded by Mr. Sundberg. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we have a unanimous decision on that. Resolution 5-15 has been adopted by the Transit Board. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 3. Believe it or not, I have an iPad, but this works better for me in a meeting like this. So item number 3, authorize the executive director to advertise for request for proposals for transit advertising service. This is an item that fits in with our recovery plan here for hopefully finding other sources of revenue. And the director will take the lead on this one again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request in front of you is for advertising services for buses and shelters. And I wanted to be clear about that in the respect that we may not necessarily desire to have shelter advertising on the island or in certain areas. But I think since we are going out for proposals for bus advertising, shelter advertising kind of fits in and dovetails in with bus advertising. And it doesn't mean that we have to accept the shelter advertising either. You know, that could be a separate piece we can lop off from the bus advertising. But I think it would be interesting to see if the income from shelter advertising would be worth our while. So that's why it's included here, not that we necessarily have to go with the shelter advertising. So I wanted to point that aspect out. More and more agencies are going to shelter advertising. It's not uncommon anymore as part of transit systems, regular advertising programs. And provisions in the RFP include the shelters. The advertising program that I'm proposing and included in this draft RFP would involve all active vehicles in the fleet, none that we surplus now or think we may surplus in the future. Most vehicles would be able to accommodate 3-sided advertising street side, curbside, and rear. There are certain makes of smaller vehicles, paratransit vehicles that have large expanses of glass in the rear where advertising would not be practical. So there's some buses that may only accommodate two sides, not all three. And the size of advertising is going to vary based on the size of the vehicle. So as a part of the RFP, we will include photos of all the types of vehicles that would be used for the advertising program. Additionally, there is built into the RFP a very strict set of filters, if you will, as far as what advertising is not allowed on the vehicles. I think I have about 2 pages of itemized types of advertising that are inappropriate for exposure on the buses. This RFP, by the way, was modeled after Whatcom Transit's advertising program. Whatcom receives about $160,000 a year in clear revenue off of their program.
How large is their fleet?
It's larger than ours, and my next comment was going to be, I wouldn't expect over $100,000 for our size fleet. And our market, a large part of the revenue is dependent on what the market will bear. And I think it's safe to say that our market here is not going to be as plentiful as the Whatcom market. The typical revenue stream is 60% of what the advertising firm brings in on total revenue. So 60% of net is the general rule of thumb for return on this type of advertising.
60% of net or of gross?
I'm sorry, gross, I'm sorry. And we can request, I've included in here, a request for minimum levels of revenue, which could exceed the 60%, but 60% would be the minimum.
Thank you.
And, we may have received some proposals, maybe none. Advertising folks I've talked to from some of these companies have indicated that, it depends on what the market will bear. And so the advertising company would come in, do a survey of the market, establish certain price points as far as what the advertising is worth. And, it'll depend on the size of our fleet and the type of market and the demographics that we have on the island.
Okay. Any further information before we move on to public comments?
No, other than, I would, got a little more cleanup to do on this, but we'd like to get it out for advertising, or out to advertise for services as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any public comments?
It's a great idea.
Mr. Freeman?
With this advertisement also, I've seen a lot of buses throughout the country that have the advertising on the inside panels.
Yes, we would include that. However, inside advertising is not at all lucrative because it's just a set market that you've got, and that's the riders that are riding in the bus. That's your market, and so most advertisers don't like to invest in that type of advertising because it is so limited and only viewed from the inside. But yes, that's
Based on my experience, almost 90% of the buses that are out there have the advertising on the outside, and they also have it on the inside. Now, if it's not lucrative, they wouldn't be paying to put it on the inside. So there's got to be a benefit there on the inside as well. They're not as large, but they're changeable, and there's a revenue stream there. So I would hope that would be part of the RFP as well.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Chairman Alberg, Joe Kunstler here. I'll be acute and I'll direct this directly to the board. I am very supportive of this. I think Mayor Dudley was very bright to bring this idea forward. But I also think, and this is just the way I think and operate, is that with discussing advertising for shelters, what if, for instance, entire bus shelters were sponsored by somebody? Like, for instance, having a bus shelter at Olaf Coopville sponsored by Navy League members, or having a bus shelter sponsored by the local schools if it serves a school, or that kind of thing. I think that's going to have to be a board decision, but I just think it's something worth thinking about, because I've got a situation in a neighboring county about trying to get a bus stop, and with those comments, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, my question, I have two questions. First one is,
Yeah, we can answer both of them.
okay, well, one pertained to the last, before this part came up. The first question is, I've seen buses that have the wrap on them. The whole bus is wrapped with the advertisement around. Is that part of the way that this is gonna be, or is it gonna be the little cardboard cutouts on the side of the bus, or what? Now, that's that question. The other question was, let's get back to the insurance thing. I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to ask a question at the end of that. Now, my understanding is our counsel, legal counsel for Island Transit, his father runs the insurance deal. Is that correct or not correct?
Okay, now, I appreciate the question. We will give you an answer on that one, but I try to keep the questions germane to the agenda item.
Okay.
So in the future, please frame your comments to the agenda item so we can stay on that.
Okay.
I think you got the answer from legal
Okay.
counsel.
You did years ago, but no, not for.
Okay,
And then,
thank you.
Mr. Grafton, you can respond to the issues about the type of advertisement.
Well, that was a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. The advertising that I have specified in the RFP would be the vinyl application, no frames, no board sort of backing to the ads. It would be a clean vinyl type. It's easy to take off, easy to put on. Any damages to the vehicle are included in here as far as it's responsibility of the contractor. And I have included in here what the cost would be of wraps. We may or may not want to do that, but I've included it as an option if we do want to do it. And that would be, and they would have the size of the vehicles to know what the charge would be on a wrap for any given size vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
And, I'm sorry, interior advertising is included.